Welcome to the Social Change Diaries, the show that looks behind the curtain at everything you want to know about the social justice and nonprofit landscape. I'm your host, Vanessa Wakeman. On today's episode of the Social Change Diaries, I am talking to a client turned friend and one of my favorite thought leaders, Saru Jayaraman. Saru is the co-founder and co-director of the Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, known as ROC United, and director of the Food Labor Research Center at University of California, Berkeley. After 9/11, together with displaced World Trade Center workers, she co-founded ROC United, which now has more than 18,000 worker members, 200 employer partners, and several thousand consumer members in a dozen states nationwide. I met Saru shortly after that time when she and her co-founder hired my agency to produce their first fundraising gala. Saru has been recognized as a champion of change by the White House in 2014 and a James Beard Foundation Leadership Award in 2015. She is also the author of 2 books, Behind the Kitchen Door, and her most recent book, Forked: A New Standard for American Dining. Just thinking about your career and your trajectory, at what point do you think you understood like the power of using your voice, not like the data, not the other information, but you as a leader of using your I feel it, I see it, I sense it, and I want to create a platform so that I can help more people. Like, what did that look like for you?
A couple of years in particular, as I've written a couple books on the industry and had to become more of a public spokesperson on the issue, I have begun to see that I can contribute in a particular way, which is that I can articulate what's going on in the industry in a particular way that is helpful, I think, to advance the cause. So I still think it's incredibly important to lift up the voices of restaurant workers and to develop their own leadership to speak on these issues. And I think there's become a role for me to also become a spokesperson on these issues and to be sometimes an even more aggressive advocate than workers can be on their own. So, for example, it can be scary for workers to, on their own, say, well, we demand a full wage from our employer plus tips. And sometimes workers don't know what's happening in other parts of the country, so it's hard for them to know what's possible. And so I'm able to have a bird's eye view and see what's happening in the industry across the country and even around the world. And then, be as ambitious and aggressive as possible, working with workers and sharing with them the information and elevating their leadership and voice, but also contributing my own. So it's definitely been a process of learning that I too am important in this struggle and that my voice is important and that I can play both a facilitator's role in lifting up other people's voices and having a voice myself in saying, like you're saying, yes to 15 for everybody as a minimum wage and no to exploitation and sexual harassment and racial segregation in our industry.
I love it. I love it. In order to be a thought leader, in order to really yield influence, you have to be vulnerable because you're sharing something that is part of you. And so how, just based on what you said about, recently becoming more comfortable with that, understanding like the power of your role, how do you deal with the vulnerable times when you're introducing something new? And so for a long time, 2013 cents was pretty acceptable. For a long time, the discrimination was like, oh, that's what happens when you work in a restaurant. And sort of, you're sort of, unapologetic, we're not doing that anymore. Like, you've exposed yourself to a lot of criticism and just a lot of naysayers, as well as a tremendous amount of support. But from a vulnerability perspective, like, what does that feel like for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we've been very seriously attacked for the last 15 years by the Restaurant Association. So we, in our work, are up against one of the most powerful opponents that it exists, the National Restaurant Association. It's a trade lobby that's led by the chains and has a tremendous amount of power. And they've done everything to us. They've tried to shut us down multiple times. They've attacked me personally. They even at one point put my 2-year-old daughter's picture up on their attack website. They pulled out 3 full-page ads in USA Today and Wall Street Journal attacking us. They had 2 congressional investigations into us. They had somebody following me around the country at one point. They've done a lot of things. And for many years, we really tried to downplay it. We really tried, we didn't want people to know that it was happening. So we hoped that nobody would see their attack website. But about a couple of years ago, when I started going on book tour, I started and I would see one of these people in the audience kind of filming me or following me. And I started just calling them out and saying, you know what? These people are after us. They're trying to attack us. They put my kid's picture up on their website. And it was amazing, Vanessa, the turnaround. Like, people were so sympathetic in general to somebody attacking us. And it really elevated in many ways our power to think that this huge, powerful restaurant association would spend, we found later, millions of dollars to attack us. It just elevated our profile. Who are we? We thought, who are we, this tiny little rinky-dink organization? But clearly we're enough of a threat to get them to spend millions of dollars to stop us. So in our case, Gandhi used to call it moral jujitsu, the idea that you use the power or the force of the oppressor against them. And in my case, opening up, being vulnerable and saying it's really hard to be attacked in this way. It's really painful to see my kids, profiled in this way. It's scary. But opening up in that way actually brought everybody in to sympathize. And all of that, opening it up and being vulnerable and saying they're attacking us, resulted actually in the Restaurant Association stopping that kind of activity. Being vulnerable and saying we made a mistake, and let's all think about how we do this differently, I think really, really helped. So the older I've gotten, the more that we've done this work, I actually have found vulnerability to be one of the most effective tools, like sharing our vulnerability as one of the most effective tools in opening our arms and welcome people in and letting them feel a part of what we're doing.
As a woman, do you feel that vulnerability dilutes any of the power in your approach and your focus? Like, there's something soft about that. Or do you still feel like it's a powerful resource for you?
I mean, it could be something that dilutes our power if it was all that we did. If all that we did was we love everybody and, we're vulnerable. Like, if that's all that we did, then yes. But so much of our work has to be being really strong, being really assertive and even aggressive, fighting for workers' rights, pushing back against this really powerful trade lobby, standing up for ourselves and people and others. I will admit there's challenges even in our own world in terms of dealing with other partners who are not women or who are not women or not people of color, who don't respect us. And so in those instances, there's a real need to be very strong and really assertive and not be sort of steamrolled in a lot of cases. Or we've had lots of instances where people don't respect us or give us the credit that we deserve because we're a women of color-led organization. So, those are not moments to be vulnerable. Those are moments to show our strength. But I think it's about being strategic about when you're vulnerable and in what instances and with what audiences. I think that's the point.
Wonderful. I'm going to throw in one final question because I'm greedy and I don't get a lot of time with you. What would you tell to a woman who's just starting out in the nonprofit sector that is full of ideas and hope and change, but doesn't quite know how to use her voice?
I would say definitely don't let anything silence you. Definitely lift up, your voice and don't, I don't know how to say this that doesn't sound totally cheesy, but we have to stop being afraid that what we're thinking is wrong and just, be willing to try things. That's the thing that men and often white men are given permission in our world to do, is just to try and fail. And in fact, I live in the Bay Area, and trying and failing in Silicon Valley is the name of the game. It's what people do. So I think the I think failure should be seen as, an opportunity to learn. And so, I think young people should definitely lift up their voices. I will say, and I also learned this the hard way, as young people, we both should not be afraid and lift up our voices. And I think there are real mentors and folks that are older than us that we can learn from. And so it has to be a good balance of lifting up our voices, questioning, testing things out, being willing to fail, and listening. I think listening is a quality that all of us need. We're young or old, women or men. We all need to learn how to listen better. And so as a young person, I wish earlier on I had sought out mentors and listened to them, because at this stage, I really, really value having mentors that I can bounce things off of. So I feel like, my advice would be both speak and be heard and try things out and don't be afraid to fail. And know that there are people who are older who have some wisdom and experience that's important to listen to and learn from.
Thank you. I agree with that. Before I let you go, I want to talk about how you roar. So that a woman who roars is someone who is unapologetic in their approach to sort of elevating just humanity, that is sort of committed to being in service in a way that's going to help people, whether they be oppressed or people that don't know they're oppressed. So tell me how you roar.
I roar by standing with and for the 12 million restaurant workers in the United States, by definitely being unapologetic for the need for change in this industry, when I'm often called a difficult woman for not backing down or not making compromises. I embrace that. I'm a difficult woman, and I'm unapologetic about the need to stop throwing women under the bus when we're fighting for workers' rights, stop throwing workers under the bus, and especially in this political moment, the need to just stand up with every fiber in our being and both resist and proactively fight for the things that we need as people in the United States, as women in the United States.
Yes, yes, yes. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen, from Saru Jayaraman, a woman who roars. She roars for the restaurant workers and for women everywhere. Thank you, Saru.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Well, thank you for joining us. I hope the information shared was helpful. And if you have questions or are looking for additional information, you can always visit our website, www.thewakemanagency.com. You can also follow us on social media using the hashtag SheRoars2020. And absolutely come back next week to see what's in store with our next guest. Thank you.